Let's start with MacGyver, because as I said, that show down here in New Zealand has always been massive. I guess partly because we've got this mentality of being able to just do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Which is what that show is all about.
DIY.
At the end of the day,
yeah.
DIY.
Yeah, I mean, the concept was, I mean, we kind of built on the premise of a guy who didn't, for some reason, he was for hire to, you know, he was kind of an agent of sorts, but more or less he was just kind of a science guy who knew how to do things and was also a former special ops guy. Who knows that history?
Mystery.
I think that's my my creation. But yeah, I mean, aside from being just clever, there was also a concept there that you didn't need a gun to solve a problem. And in the mid-'80s, that was a unique concept. I think what we're sharing time with the A-Team and shows like that, where
Pretty gun heavy.
where it was nothing but explosions and things like that. But MacGyver had a different approach to things, and I think that really, at the time, just grabbed a part of an audience that was yearning for that, especially parents.
Yeah, when you went into that audition, did you have any idea of how popular the show's run would go on to become?
Oh God, no!
Yep.
I have no.
You just thought
idea.
you were making a little thing that you'd do a season and.
I was literally just doing a pilot for a show that didn't, I don't know, it didn't have any signs of greatness to it. It was clever enough, and when I auditioned for it, I was ready to either pack it in and, you know, find something else to do in life, or see where this thing went. And
because it's not like your whole life, you weren't angling to be an actor the whole time, right? You weren't born going, I want to act.
Right.
You did all sorts of stuff.
oh yeah, yeah, and I like to think I still do that stuff, but boy, have I been set straight on that lately.
It's always terrible doing research on Wikipedia, but I understand at some point you were training whales?
Yeah.
Or working
well,
with
I
whales?
wasn't training whales, I was working with them.
Right.
In that I worked at Marineland of the Pacific, and I was hired as one of, I don't know, and it started out with like about 20 other actors. Whoever owned the park at the time was trying a new approach to it. And, it was Irwin Allen, who through Fox had acquired the park. Anyway, I got hired, and over a period of time, they kept firing people and firing. And I started to get a little mouthy about the, I don't know, it wasn't quality work, and I didn't think they were taking advantage of or utilizing the behaviors of the animals, and they were making it more about the actors, and I just thought that's just sloppy thinking. So they said, well, go ahead and write something then, which I did, and was able to convince them that it was more about presentation to what the animals can do, and because they're glorious, beautiful killer whales when I was working. And so it flew, the idea flew, and so I'd written that and another script for another, like, pilot whale, I guess.
Yeah.
And it all just kind of, and I was in heaven because I was, you know, from Minnesota, which is, you know,
But more
Midwest,
low,
United
more low
States.
key.
But in so doing that stuff at I want to say Waterworld, but SeaWorld, Marineland. I was, you know, I thought I'd found another calling because I just loved being with animals, but it was just time to move on, and the park was getting along without me. Thank you very much. So it was time to mosey on.
Yeah, and then I guess you end up in a soap, this really popular soap, and then that jumps into MacGyver.
Yeah.
And you're suddenly, when did you feel that people, I guess, you're famous, right? You're famous now. You're famous then. when did you find out that you were famous? Was there a moment where you were just like, oh, this is hitting big, you know?
It almost sounds like a trick question because you're assuming that there's a switch that goes off, but
I guess, was there a moment, I suppose, when you realized that you were a big deal? When people knew MacGyver as a household name, I suppose.
well, there was a moment actually during MacGyver. We were shooting MacGyver, and we started to, because of the general concept of a TV hero not using a gun to solve problems, that got and therefore we would, I don't know, innately making a commentary about guns, and the NRA, of course, took umbrage with our approach and started to, they should have just not said anything and just let life go on, but they put us on a list of boycottable television shows. They and got kind of loud about it to the point where I said, "Great!" The next interview I did, I said I couldn't be prouder.
That's so good.
Yeah, and it was at that point where I kind of realized that we might have a little power, our influence, I guess is a better word for it. And certainly that became evident when we started kind of keeping track of who our audience was, and it was families. It was kids and parents of those kids that would come along for the ride and were just ecstatic with the whole idea of this relatively non-violent character. And from that point on, it was, And as far as I'm dodging your question about when did I know I was famous.
No, it's a terrible question because it
really is.
No, yeah. I don't want you to go, You answered it well.
Well, my mom said, you're just you.
Yeah.
You're not famous.
What do you make of TV now where you've got we've swung the other way, where things are pretty hyper-violent in general? What do you make of the TV landscape when you look around today?
I took some flack for going from one kind of non-violent-y type show to Stargate, which was not hyper-violent, but it was a cartoon-type violence that you knew nobody was getting hurt, and most of the people things that were getting hurt were alien bad guys and cartoons in themselves. So it was, I made my excuses if I was asked to make an excuse as to how could you do that. I said, well, just heed the signs, son. There's a 12-legged yucky thing coming at me. I'm going to shoot the dang thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm allowed a gun this time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm not going to look around for a rubber band and a clip. But
because that show brought in a whole new fan base for you. That show, you're sort of, and it's a very different show. It's an amazing sci-fi show, and suddenly you've got a whole new fan that digs your work.
Yeah, well, what happened was, from my perspective, was that I, stammering through a sentence, I brought with me a certain audience from MacGyver. Stargate had its built-in audience who were Stargate fans and Kurt Russell fans and James Spader and Stargate. So there was a combo plate there that meshed real nicely to make a very a larger audience, basically. And almost to a man, woman, and child, they've remained loyalists, loyal to Stargate and MacGyver, but Stargate being the most recent one. So I'm pretty happy with the way things like that have turned out.
And it's cool because you brought your brand of humor along to Stargate as well.
Such as it is.
It wasn't, no, but you've always had that sense of humor in your shows, which I think is pretty neat.
Yeah,
You're funny. You've got natural comedic timing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Did you say timing?
Yeah.
Why, thank you. I actually had to kind of apologize for that during the Stargate days, because in the early goings, I was hired as, they hired me, and then I guess the franchise started to come around. They started auditioning and hiring people around that. So my business partner and I became executive producers, and so there was I came in with a certain strength, and I was able to relax with my creative tone. And so when things started rolling, and for early episodes, we'd have table reads, and I would consistently have something else going on in my head for the dialogue, or it was because I grew up in improv theater, and it was always just respond, react, and it was getting laughs during the reads, which I realized in retrospect was quite rude and quite disrespectful. And Brad Wright, to his credit, took me aside and told me so, and he was absolutely right. His approach was, his perspective was, we've written these scripts, and we've bled them and sweated them, and then we all sit down and read them, and you just tear them apart. Basically, you just do it your way. And he was right, and I told him so. And because and another thing was happening, the other cast members were starting to take some liberties, if you will.
You're influencing everyone.
Yeah,
You were like a naughty child
very bad
in this really serious show.
It really was a naughty child syndrome. So we all just had to pull in the reins and be respectful of the process, and then find things later on, maybe not right up front. Build on the script itself, which it worked.
You did you reined yourself back in a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, until the last few episodes where...
Then it went crazy.
No, well, one of my friends from the show, a guy named Andy Makita, was directing, and I did something on camera that was just so over the top, and so like I edited myself on camera. It was panning with me, and there was like a bad guy, or maybe it was Teal'c, I don't know, sitting in a chair, and I was kind of cross-examining to him or at him, and I walked behind him, and then real quickly I shot over there, so when the camera continued its pan, I was already there, and you didn't see any motion behind him. For one thing, he had a huge head. So, but where I showed up was right over his shoulder, and like, almost twirling my mustache, and it was just so far gone that, I mean, everybody was laughing. It was hard to...
Yeah.
I knew that I was misbehaving if the crew was laughing out loud, and so I did find a way to rein things in eventually.
You just want to have fun. You just want to have fun.
Well, certainly that was my like guest stars. The word got around that our set was a great set to work within, because I only had one demand, and that was have fun, make it fun, be respectful, and do the work, get the job done, know your lines and all that stuff. But if you have problems, speak them respectfully, and we'll fix it. But
do you get sick of the question, going back to MacGyver again, do you get sick of that question of your favourite invention or your favourite moment in that show? I think I watched, you're on a talk show in Australia, I think last year, and you're talking about a plane that took off, and just, I think Mythbusters ruined the whole thing and said it could never happen.
Yeah.
You just like dropped like a, but I think you said that was one of your favourite moments?
Yeah, well, it's my go-to, what's the craziest thing you guys
What's the craziest thing you did? Yeah.
Yeah,
Because stuff
much
got crazy.
How so?
just a few moments, you know, moments.
I'll be honest with you, I can't remember the ones that really stood out because they became so matter of fact and day to day that nothing seemed extraordinary as we were doing them. So I'm at a loss, you know, you could, no, not that one.
Yeah, so many. Not that one, that was terrible, that one. And then you end up being stuck on a plane that's leaking and...
Oh, a real life?
A real life scenario all of a sudden, you know?
Yeah, coming over, I can't name the airlines, I don't think, but anyway, on my way over to, I want to say Melbourne, yeah, we're like 2.5 hours out of Los Angeles, not even to Hawaii, by gum, and we got alarms went off on the plane, and I happened to be in the head at the time, and I came out, and there was this like Class 5 river coming down right down the aisle, and I just kind of looked in both directions and realized that there was a problem somewhere, and they were losing the water supply. And on a 15-hour flight, you want to have water, and we were on the verge of losing it all in 2.5 hours. So we had to turn around and go back there, and I kind of leaned to my travel partner, and I just said, God, if they only knew I was on board. A moment of lack of humility there. But it was one of those fun moments. That's like when we turned around, the next day they sent us off, and we'd gotten to know some of the people. And
I love it.
some of them said, well, why didn't you fix it? I said, I paid good money for my seat. You fix it.
Just finally, I'm curious about your fan base, because obviously you're here to talk to fans of, I imagine fans of Stargate and fans of MacGyver. Are they, because fans of cult shows are fascinating, because some of them think that you're that character, some of them don't. You know, it's a vast and crazy array of people. Do you enjoy those interactions?
You know what I really love about like the cons, the conventions, is the commitment that many of the fans make to their costuming. And I mean, seriously, some of the creations are just, or reproductions of characters that live in science fiction. I mean, it's just spectacular. And the most impressive to me are the people who just give over to the whole thing and are willing to walk in amongst other
it's pretty impressive.
People who should be committed. That's not came out wrong.
No.
Who make the commitment to character and franchise. It's just spectacular. I just love people watching in that respect.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I do enjoy the interaction.
Cool. Well, there's some very passionate New Zealand people, so I imagine you'll get to see plenty of costumes.
I hope
coming out. I have no doubt.
Well, with the legacy of Peter Jackson in town, I mean, my God, come on.
Yeah.
You gotta grab onto that. And,
big time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like our makeup.
Among other things, I think. Yeah. Imaginations and creativity.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything that you want to talk about that you never get asked about? You're like, God, everyone's just talking to me about MacGyver and bloody Stargate.
Yeah, short of launching into a political diatribe, it has to do with Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. That
yeah, well, we see a lot of them down here.
Yeah, are you versed in the organization?
Yeah, you're a big supporter, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
On the board of advisors now, but
going back just briefly to the gun stuff you were talking about earlier, as far as the NRA not being big fans of MacGyver. I mean, I'm curious because you look back at I guess, action heroes of the 80s. Someone like Chuck Norris, he's the opposite direction. He's gone so pro-guns, it's just insane.
I know.
And then
yeah.
someone like you is so anti-gun. Is there that discussion's been going on for so long, does that come into your life at all? Like, are you still having these discussions with people?
Not so much.
Or do you stay out of that?
Well, I stay out of it publicly. I'm pretty mouthy off camera, but I found, and I had learned a lesson very painfully when I was new to Twitter, and Twitter was new to the world.
What did you do?
Yeah, I just spoke up. Basically, is I just because I'm not real fond of. Well, let me just put it out there. Republicans in the United States in general. I really have had problems with their behavior. Let's just leave it at that.
And you tweeted something about
that.
that.
Yeah, and I mentioned that, and I had just seen a debate or some kind of he said, she said thing between parties, and it was just absurd what I was hearing. It just hit me on a day where, you're not fooling anybody, when in fact they are fooling at least half our nation over there. But I was told by a very dear friend who's very aware of my my public, not persona, my audience, I guess, and how they don't want to hear me spouting off about political things, and I thought, I don't mind, people knowing how I feel about it, and maybe, I'll influence somebody else to take a finer look at what is actually being said, by some of these absurd human beings. And but I knew what she was saying, and the responses on Twitter were starting to show up, like mind your own business kind of thing. And I can't think of anything that's more my business than the politics of my country. But anyway, I've kind of begged off being real mouthy about it. But as far as the guns things go, I'm just dumb enough and naive enough to say, well, if there were no guns, there would be no gun play, and it's that simplistic to me.
Crazy concept, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it just doesn't fly in the NRA. The head of the NRA, I forget his name, but he's just an idiot. I mean, just like a calloused. Go on, just fill in the blank.
You're too polite, Richard.
I am, actually.
You're too polite.
Well, it's a family show, right?
Hey, thank you.
Oh, anytime.
You're awesome. You're awesome.
Yeah.
Looking back over your career, would you do anything differently when you look back?
I may have, no, I can't really say that I would, but it might have been wiser for me to start earlier, I think, because I was such a little vagabond, and I was hopping freights when I was 17, rode a bicycle to Alaska and back to Minnesota, and just, things like that. Just hitchhiking around the country and just living life in the late 60s, early 70s. Yes, folks, that's how old I am. And, surviving the 80s and 90s. And so I just kind of dragged my heels a little bit. I was kind of exploring everything else other than maybe what I should do for a living. But my dad was a speech and English teacher, and he directed school plays at a high school, and that's what got my attention as far as the theater goes. I'd go to his rehearsals and I'd just see what, you know, during rehearsals they would have like Twinkies instead of birthday cakes, and any job I can get that will give me free Twinkies, that's what I want to do.
It's all about the catering,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. You know, you've been there. It is.